Welcome to The Cleaning, a podcast about Apple TV's Silo. This is our Book versus Show podcast. That's where we look at the latest episodes and compare how the events of the latest episode line up with things from the books. There we are, things from the books. This week we're talking about Season 3, Episode 8, Gray Goo, The Mandalorian and Gray Goo. Get ready, we're going to talk about all the differences and changes. Obviously, this podcast will contain spoilers for all 3 books in the Silo series, as well as every episode up to Season 3, Episode 8. And, spoiler alert, things in the trailer which might come from Episode 9 and 10, I'm going to talk about those as well. I don't want you to be spoiled, so please jump away now so you don't get spoiled. This is a podcast intended for book readers only. On this podcast, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about, once again, changes from Season 3, Episode 8, Gray Goo, to the book. There are, as I've said all season long, these specific events don't really happen in the books at all, but, you know, if you kind of squint, you can say, well, that refers to this instance in the book. I'm going to try to do that. Plus, I'm going to talk about characters who escape death. That's right, characters who died in these books who are alive on the show. Plus, I'm going to talk about characters who have yet to die in the books, who are still alive in the show, and do I think the show will keep them alive like they did these other characters? So get ready, we're going to be talking about death, people. Oh, so fun. And then finally, I like to say I'm somebody with real strong opinions. Who cares about my opinions? I always say, I want to know what you think. My opinions don't really matter to anybody but me, but I am going to say them because the show has turned a story I loved. I always say that I started these podcasts about these books because I read this book back in 2013 and I loved it and I wanted to get people excited for the series. But Graham Yost and his writers have taken a story that I loved and turned it into a story that's not for me. I titled this podcast, this Book versus Show podcast, Terrible Writing, but it's really specifically writing that doesn't appeal to me, writing that I either hate or I'm bored by or I'm not engaging with like I would hope to. Now, there are really good moments that I talked about on the non-spoiler podcast that I love, but too often I'm just banging my head against all these changes. Who cares what I think? I want to know what you think. I'm going to talk about your feedback briefly. So if you gave me feedback last week, normally I talk about it a lot. This week I'm only going to talk about it a little bit, but I'll get to that in a bit. First, let's start with, as we always do, on Episode 8, Gray Goo, and how does it line up with elements of the books? The episode begins with a flashback to show how Patrick Kennedy and Lukas ended up in Silo 17. I've said it every podcast, Patrick Kennedy isn't a character in the books. Lukas never goes outside on a walk to Silo 17. It's completely made up. It's all fabricated for the show. It is dramatic. Obviously, we care about these characters. Lukas gets shot by a drone. That never happens in the books. But, of course, the show introduced an idea that is in the books, and that is Charlotte is a drone pilot, and here the silos have drones. So you can see, well, they did take this one fact and put it into the show and just created a new moment for it. So that's about all we can say. Patrick Kennedy and Lukas go into Silo 17. Lukas is never in Silo 17. We find out this information about the safeguard and how it was stopped in Silo 17 by, sealing up the pipe, or temporarily stopped, as our buddy the algorithm says. It's all new. It's not from any book. It is good. Certainly we love Steve Zahn and we love these characters, but there's no real book corollary I could find. Let's talk about the before times. In the before times, Daniel is brought out to look at this advanced digger. Then he and Helen are brought to a Trillionaire's farm and their little greenhouse for a dinner and an info dump. That never happens in the books. In the books, Daniel is working on this project from the start. He doesn't know the true purpose of the project, certainly at first, but he's working on it. He never rejects it and flies away to be to be Gray Goo with Helen in a alternate timeline. He's working on it. He's a part of it. He is culpable. The show is taking Daniel and making him not culpable. Will this tie into Daniel's ultimate fate? I'll talk about a bit in the death section of the podcast. We do have Anna, who's such a big part of the book, who is kind of sidelined a bit and introduced into a relationship with Charlotte, which she doesn't have in the books. I've mentioned on multiple podcasts, Anna is a fatal attraction type character in lust with Daniel, and desperate to be with him and him not be with Helen. And that really is the motivation behind so much that happens in the books. It's not in the show. The show's not going to touch it. Yeah, so all brand new stuff. Daniel and Helen walking away, that's not from the books at all. Let's move back into Silo 18. In Silo 18, Camille is not a character in the book, so her battle with her husband, Robert Sims, is not in the books. It seems to be a fun little moment that she's locking up her husband. I'm sure a lot of wives would love to do that. Write down in the comments if you'd love to do that if you're a wife. If you're listening on audio podcast, reach out to us on PHQ on all social media apps and tell us, hey, yeah, I want to be Camille. I want to lock up my no good husband. Juliet has a big kind of powwow with her second in command, Bernard, who is dead in the books. I'll talk about that in the death section. And let me see if there's anything I could say. Well, that kind of ties in. Certainly the elevator in the mines, that is not a storyline from the book at all. Bernard is dead. Carla is dead. Knox is dead by this point. Maybe I should jump straight to the dead section. But I guess the idea that Silo 18 can be shut down with a safeguard procedure, that is true to the books. And so within it, I guess there is something. Are you guys okay? I ask this every week. I want you to go down in the YouTube comments and tell me, are you okay with this change, with this new world, and with what the show has done? And actually, before I get to the death section, let's talk about people's feedback. Jorge Tames Photo, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, they wrote, I wouldn't mind the pacing of the show if I knew that Silo would have 6 to 7 seasons. Knowing that the show is going to finish at season 4 means that the show is both running out of time and wasting time. I sadly agree with that comment. And then we had Quinn Salvador, who wrote a real witty comment about Iran and the microtech. And I'll just read the final comment. They say, tremendous strategy, folks. Absolutely top tier brain power at work. Let's get to it. That nanotech, which I mentioned in last week's Book versus Show podcast, is kind of introduced in the novel Shift, rather in a sly way, like, hey, Senator Donald in the book, hey, why are you going to Boston? Oh, Senator Thurman's getting this nanobio procedure done. And Daniel Donald doesn't really think much about it. It's not dropped in at a dinner from Per Stenson, who's not a character in the books, by saying, this is the ultimate evil we got to build and protect our lives from. I want to point out last week that when talking about Per Stenson, I mentioned about how he really does seem to be based on a bunch of billionaires and trillionaires, but specifically Elon Musk. And I had read something off Google. Mark wrote me and said, Elon Musk has no Asperger's. That is a false claim. So thank you, Mark, for straightening me out. Never listen to AI. Maybe the nanobots put that in the AI. Shirley loves Lukas, the character of Lukas in the books. And Shirley, a great listener, said, with this pacing, I don't see how they're going to reveal much in the 3 episodes that are left. I keep getting disappointed every season because Lukas is a non-character on the show, and he was my favorites in the books. Lukas was certainly one of my favorites in the books, too. Let me hold up The Wool, the first book, where he really becomes an adorable, lovable character. He's just, the show writers have never been interested in him. It's a detriment, and maybe I'll go into this a bit in my end of the podcast discussion. I got feedback on Daniel and Helen and Charlotte and Anna. Link Hogthrob, another great listener, said, Daniel has zero chemistry with anybody. Whoa, but it was ice cold with Anna. Okay, so, don't expect that relationship in the show. My Brico just said that the show is definitely putting Anna and Charlotte together instead of Daniel and Anna. Yeah, that seems okay. Unknown said that this is going to be weird of how it changes the show it changes the book storyline a whole lot. Plus, I don't like Senator Thurman being a side character rather than a mastermind. Well, again, what you and I may like about these books doesn't matter. What matters is what Graham Yost likes about these books, or what he likes about the story, because he's not taking much from the books. And again, this will be part of my, it's not really a rant so much as just a throw my hands up in the air, and this is what Silo has become, part of it. Why don't I go jump to the characters who died in the books. Now, in the first book, in the book Wool, which was covered on Silo season 1 and 2, there is the big rebellion where people in the Down Deep and other people are like, Bernard, IT, Raiders, you guys are evil, you guys are a fascist system, we're going to fight back and we're going to take control of this silo from you. in that rebellion, the character Knox dies. I haven't mentioned this on many podcasts, but Carla McLean, as the book generally refers to the character, McLean dies in that rebellion too. And then at the end of the first book, I always mention that Bernard dies, but maybe I haven't emphasized that it's a real change from how the show presented it. The show presents it as Bernard hears about the safeguard procedure. He's like, I've been doing all this, and they can just flip a switch and kill me. To hell with this, I'm going to go out and, see the sunrise or whatever. That's not how the book Wool goes. I've talked on multiple podcasts on how in the book Wool, Bernard is kind of a one-note character. I do mention there are little hints where you see, okay, this guy is doing these evil things because he thinks it's for the betterment of the silo and the residents of the silo. But Bernard is so evil. The way the book ends is that Billings, who you've always assumed, the reader probably assumed is a corporate stooge because Bernard wanted Sheriff Billings to be sheriff rather than Juliet. The book ends with Billings realizing that Bernard is the real evil person, and it's not Bernard going out of the silo on his own. It's Billings forcing him out, like, hey, you're evil, you've done all these evil things, you need to go clean. And Bernard does die in that first book. So the show has let all three of these characters, Lukas, Carla, and Bernard, live. Are you happy with that decision? There are positive ideas you would think about them. We need more characters than just Juliet doing everything. So keeping a bit of muscle in Knox around makes some sense. Bernard knows so much, and so he can wise up Juliet. Maybe that's why they're keeping him around and giving him this mini redemption arc. McLean, that's an emotional connection for Walker. So you see why all three are around. What are your thoughts? Are you happy the show has spared these three characters the death sentence they got in the books? I mentioned this is a spoiler podcast, so let's talk about characters who die in this book. And in both of these books, a lot of characters die, but if they're not characters on the show, I'm not going to spotlight them too much. Two big show characters who die in the second book, Shift, are Dr. Victor and Anna Thurman. I want to read Dr. Victor, who goes out by blowing out his own brains, I think is how it's described in the books at one point. So let me read his suicide note. And if you like these reading sections, please let me know in the comments. If you say, I read the book, you don't need to read to me, go ahead and tell me, and that will also be good. So here is a bit of Dr. Victor's suicide note. He's writing this suicide note, addressing it to Senator Thurman, the big mastermind in the book. You and I have spent much of our adult lives scheming to save the world. Several adult lives, in fact. Now that deed is done, I ponder a question more dire, and one I fear I cannot answer, and that we were never brave nor bold enough to pose. So I ask you now, dear friend, was this world worth saving to begin with? Were we worth saving? This endeavor was launched with that grand assumption taken for granted. Now I ask myself for the first time, and while I view the cleansing of the world as our defining achievement, this business of saving humanity may have been our gravest mistake. The world may be better off without us. I have not the will to decide. I leave that to you. The final shift, my friend, belongs to you, for I have worked my last. I do not envy you the choice you will have to make. The pact we formed so long ago haunts me as never before. I feel that what I'm about to do, that this is the easy way. And that is Dr. Victor taking himself out. If you want to know the true motivation, there are a bunch, but the big one, and this is on page 498 of my copy of Wool, Donald/Daniel in the show says, oh my goodness, he's reading, and he finds out that there was only going to be one egg to hatch. Let me read it here. There was a discussion in our last meeting of allowing two facilities to reach E-Day for redundancy, or the possibility of holding one facility back in reserve. That has been deemed inadvisable. Having all baskets in one egg is better than the danger of allowing two or more eggs to hatch. And so, yeah, not good, not good. Now, also in this book, Anna Thurman is poisoned by Daniel, and she dies. Of course, he does that because Anna's been so infatuated with him and done really evil things to him. That's not true in the show. So let me read real quick a bit from this. Drink, he told her, lifting her arm gently. Then you can tell me whatever you like. This is Daniel giving the poison and making Helen drink it. So bitter, she whispered after her first swallow. Shh, Donald told her. Drink, you need this. Jumping ahead a bit, as she slumped against him, Donald flashed back to the night of their first kiss, back in college, her with too much to drink, falling asleep on his frat house sofa, her head on his shoulder, and Donald had stayed like that for the rest of the night, his arm trapped and growing numb while a party thrummed and finally faded. They had woken the next morning, Anna stirring before he did. She smiled and thanked him, called him her guardian angel, and gave him a kiss. That seemed several ages ago. And then he heard her, right then in that moment as she took in one last sudden, trembling lungful, a gasp. Her body stiffened for a moment, and then cold and trembling fingernails sank into his shoulder. And Donald held her as that grip slowly relaxed, as Anna Thurman breathed her very last. Wow. So, okay. In episode 8, Dr. Victor has that last look as Helen and Daniel fly away. They've decided they don't want to be part of the silo Gray Goo machine. And I think a lot of people read Dr. Victor's look at them flying away as evil. Oh, how dare you reject our proposal. Part of me wonders, though, if that is supposed to show the audience that Dr. Victor is wondering if he should have been on that helicopter. Because later, as we see in the books, he takes his own life, realizing all the terrible choices he's made. Now, Anna Thurman is not infatuated with Daniel, so what do you think? Is the show going to spare her? Because in the end, she's not so evil. Or will her infatuation be with Charlotte? And so Charlotte has to kill her. What do you think? Now, a good number of characters die in the third book that are TV show characters. Senator Thurman dies, Lukas dies, Shirley dies, and Daniel Donald dies. Because Daniel rejected being part of the Silo project, as I mentioned earlier, he's less responsible for this horrific thing that happens to humanity and what humanity ends up in. And so, do you think Daniel will die? Because in the books, it's kind of he's dying because he knows he's responsible and needs to pay the price. Or will this be a way for the show to spare Daniel? Go down in those comments, let me know. Shirley has a heroic moment where she sacrifices her life so others can live. Now that she's pregnant, would she do it? Would you be okay with her doing it? What about Lukas? As I said, reading listener Shirley's feedback, Lukas is a very minor character on the show. Would the show spare him? They've spared minor characters before. I want to know your thoughts on characters dying. Go down and talk to me. I'm going to end this podcast. If you give me feedback, let me say I'm going to read a bunch in the next podcast. This one I just want to get to because of my frustration, and I feel so terrible. And I'm going to attack the writers, but the writers, what they've done is they've taken a story I love and made it a story that I either hate, I'm bored by, I'm not engaged with, but maybe other people are, and hopefully you are. Again, I hope nobody feels as frustrated as I do in this. You know, my opinion's just one opinion. I have maybe stronger beliefs about politics, like, hey, how can you spend our money? And if you disagree with me there, I might fight back more. But this is a TV show. Who cares what I think? You know, if you think, and if you're enjoying it, that's what I want to hear. To get into this discussion, I want to talk about famed screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan, one of the most popular screenwriters of all time. He wrote many classics, but I'm going to point out two: Star Wars: Return of the Jedi and Raiders of the Lost Ark. When you watch these movies, a lot of people watch them and come out, you know, what a fun ride that was. But there's also, especially on YouTube and on the interwebs, there are these theories that, you know, hey, in Return of the Jedi, Luke's plan to rescue Han, it was illogical, it was stupid. They're trying to rescue one person, and so their plan has them give up 3 people to also be hostage. So now they have to rescue 4 people rather than just one. There's this big back and forth of, well, on this one attempt, you could have got Han out, but then you've left 3 people behind you need to rescue. Like, the beginning part of Return of the Jedi, it really doesn't make much sense. But I'll just speak for myself as I watched it. Now, of course, I was a kid, but when I watched it, boy, it was fun. Look at all the jokes, look at the laughs, look at the action, look at the adventure. I was swept along. It wasn't until later that I thought, boy, that plan doesn't make a lick of sense. Why? Because I was engaged. I had turned off my, critical thinking and turned on my, boy, this is fun. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, a lot of people really enjoyed that movie. Speaking for myself, I loved it. It was such a fun ride. You get home and you read people online say, in the movie, Indiana Jones really doesn't do anything. The Nazis were always planning to get the Ark, take it to this island and test it before showing it to anybody else. By opening the Ark, they were automatically killed. They fought the whole movie back and forth with Indy for the Ark. But if he hadn't done anything, they were still going to go open it and get all killed. Because I was engaged with the laughs and fun and thrill of Raiders of the Lost Ark or the laughs and fun and thrills of Return of the Jedi, I'm not watching it going, God, this is preposterous. Silo has lost me. I love this. I always say I started this podcast before the first episode was out because I loved this book. I really loved this book. I was so excited that I was get to experience it again. And it was a story that I just loved. And what Graham Yost and the writers have done is taken it from a story I love to a story that I push up against. It's clunky. This Orla Kent mystery seems to exist solely to set up, hey, guess what? There's a secret elevator in the mines. And that'll certainly be helpful in episodes 9 and 10, you assume. But the way we got there was, oh my gosh, wait a minute. Knox's dad, who listeners really don't remember, was mentioned in season 2. Wait, he's back. No, he's dead. Wait, he's really alive. Wait, he designed an elevator. It was just clunky. I like the character Billings. I certainly like Deputy Hanks. I like Knox. But boy, was this an awkward way to get there. And Orla Kent, I predicted that her boyfriend killed her in episode 2 before it was even revealed that she had been murdered. So the story didn't surprise me at all. So unlike Return of the Jedi or Raiders of the Lost Ark, I watch this and I'm bumping up against the problems that I see with it, the failure in the writing. This love story between Daniel and Helen, I don't think the change was bad. I said in the very first episode of season 3, episode 1, I said, oh, watching Daniel and Helen fall in love, that's probably a smart show invention. To me, this love story has been clunky. It hasn't been love. A lot of episodes, they aren't in love. They have a real sweet moment. I'll admit this moment in episode 8 of, hey, I don't want to be Gray Goo outside of a silo with anybody but you. I did kind of like that moment, but it's not love. And Daniel and Helen, they were bribed and threatened. Hey, don't look into this Iran event. 2 things happened after they were bribed and threatened. Daniel's friend Sam said, hey, look into Per Stenson. And Daniel rented a minivan and told Helen, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep investigating. Based on those 2 things, suddenly Per Stenson says, you know what? Don't threaten or bribe them. Let's bring them here in the minivan. I'll give them lots of money. And then, admittedly, maybe not lots of money to him, but I'll give them money and tell them every single thing. What? As a viewer, you might think, well, I guess, he was like, okay, they're not going to quit looking into it. Why don't we bring them into the inner circle and make them sign an NDA? I can logically fill in that hole or idea, but that's me as a viewer having to do work for the show's terrible writing. That, for me, again, if you like this, I'm glad. For me, they wrote something that I hated and banged my head against the wall. And I'm going to end by talking about something I've said multiple times. What's my favorite moment in this second book shift? It's what I call the Silo Grand Opening Party, the book's Democratic National Convention, the tragedy that befalls Daniel and Helen. And it is not just a tragedy of we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. It is a tragedy caused by evil people doing selfish things. It's not just, oh my God, I feel so bad that Daniel and Helen, this terrible thing befalls them in the book. It also makes me so mad at these villains, makes me want Daniel and Helen to get their revenge on them. Daniel especially, get your revenge on these people who treated you terribly. By having Daniel and Helen say, no, we don't want to be a part of it. You know what the show is setting up. I know what the show is setting up. There's still going to be a tragedy. These 2 lovers are still going to be separated into different silos. But it's going to be just dumb luck. We were there at the wrong time. We went to this silo opening party we never should have gone to. It's not going to be done because people were doing it purposely to do something, for selfish reasons to separate them. And I hate it. I hate it with a passion. I hate the choices they've made. Again, these are choices they made that other people may love. I hope you love. I hope everybody loves this. I hope you especially love it. For me, they have made a terrible choice. Let me say one final thing. If you watch my previous podcast, I talk about how the book shift, this first half of it, is like the movie Titanic. And I talked about why, if you're the show, you would switch it from Titanic to something else. They switched it up to be more like Lost. Lost was a real popular show. A lot of people love Lost. I watched every episode of Lost, but Lost frustrated me with it the way that it was a mystery box doling out the mysteries, dragging things out, really kind of sometimes nonsensical things. I've already talked about the nonsensical things enough. I wish they had treated it more like the book, and I would have enjoyed it more. That's it for this week. I'm going to watch these final 2 episodes, and I'm going to try to watch them differently. Obviously, this is the storyline they want to tell, and it's a storyline and kind of pace and process and story format that I'm not enjoying. What I mentioned on the non-spoiler podcast is that moment of Jimmy Solo realizing that his mom had died to save him, saying that I'd never experienced death until I experienced the death of everybody. That is a powerful moment. That's what's going to push me through these last 2 episodes. I hope I'm going to enjoy them, but right now, I think Graham Yost and his writing team have done a terrible job of writing a show for me particularly. That's it. Hey, let me put on a smile and say, hopefully next week it'll turn around. I want your thoughts. I'm going to read a lot of your feedback next week on YouTube. Go down in comments. If you're listening on audio podcast at Double PHQ on all of your favorite apps, talk to you then.